With free agency settling down and the Packers having already inked 2 monster deals, where do the team needs stand as we head into the NFL draft? And more importantly, where are they when it comes to the premium positions?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. It wasn't that long ago that we were on the show talking about team need. And we're going to do that again today, but we're going to do it in a different way. And the reason is I have heard some Packer fans talking about the needs of the team from a way that it doesn't make any sense to me. But I think there's also potentially some spots where you go, maybe this is more important than we realized. And I want to frame it today with the most important positions. And I was thinking about this because I was trying to stack up the Packers. You know, there these tweets, who have the best core. And they showed like the Eagles and I think it was the Bears maybe. And I was like, well, the answer is the team that has Jordan Love because he's the best quarterback of that group. And so I started to think about it. And I was like, okay, the way that I generally stack draft need is by their value. What positions are most valuable? Because to me, this idea of best player available has always been a myth, and it is a myth. The best player for your team that's available is not the one with the highest grade. It's the one who can come in and make the biggest impact on your team. And that includes opportunity, so your current roster construction, and it includes positional value. How much of an impact does that player at that position make on any team, but also on your team? What kind of a force multiplier can he be? And the most important position is quarterback. Now, we know the Packers are not going to take an early round quarterback selection, or we're pretty sure about that, right? They're going to pay Jordan Love this offseason. Jason Hirschhorn, my co-founder at The Leap and America's Guest, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to, wrote a treatise on day 3 quarterbacks this year. If the Packers don't take one, they will certainly take one next year. I would expect them every other year to be taking swings in the quarterback market, just trying to see what you can find. But Jordan Love, I mean, legitimately, in the second half of the year, the best quarterback in the league. Played like that anyway. The last throw of the season, he's going to want back. But the future is extremely, extremely bright for Jordan Love. Okay. You guys, are you sitting down? They're fine with Jordan Love. Okay. After that, though, this question is interesting of positional value. Now, we talked about everydayers are going to remember, and subscribers to The Leap are going to remember, these Robert Saleh defenses, D'Amico Ryans and his team build included, They prioritized the front, the pass rush. And the Packers have some very good players up front. To me, pass rush is equal to coverage. I understand the case that coverage is maybe slightly more important than pass rush, but coverage is a weak link system. One pass rusher can do more for your team than one cover player. This is the same with offensive line. An offensive tackle is a premium position. It's a really good position. We're going to talk about OT. But offensive line is a weak link system. So yes, offensive tackles are extremely important, but your offensive line as a unit is what is most important. And one bad player, if you have three really good players, one bad player can scuttle the whole thing. On the edges, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Lucas Van Ness. That is a really, really nice group. You've got Kingsley Enagbare. I think they're in a pretty good place there, though you can never have too many of those guys. So if the Packers, who at the top of this draft have 25, 41, 58, plus 88, 91, you have a luxury of being able to say, look, it's not the thing that the team needs the most, but you can never have too many pass rushers. The other side of this, though, and this is something we talked about on the Leap on Monday. I'll spare you the quote. I'll spare you the tagline. The Packers are in the last year of the deal with Kenny Clark. He's set to count a lot of money on the cap, $27.5 million. That's what Christian Wilkins, I was going to say Kenny Wilkins. Christian Wilkins just got paid in Las Vegas. They're the same age. This is what these kinds of players cost. Are the Packers going to want to pay Kenny Clark at the top of the market? And if they do, why haven't they already done it? Because doing so would likely lower his cap hit by a significant amount. And maybe that's something that they'll just do later, and they'll just eat into their available cap space and say, okay, we'll take our available cap space from the regular season and just borrow it from the Kenny Clark deal. All right, extension, cut that number in half, and there's the 10 plus million that they can use during the regular season such that they need it. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to do in an extension. But they haven't done it yet. That's interesting. Devontae Wyatt showed some nice things as a pass rusher, still far from a complete player. Carl Brooks showed some nice things as a disruptor, as a pass rusher, still far from a complete player. The 49ers have said, we are just going to keep throwing draft capital at the wall. They traded DeForest Buckner and then used that pick on Javon Kinlaw because they felt like they needed a hoss inside as a pass rusher. The 49ers, even with Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead, went out and spent major money on Javon Hargrave. The Jets have Quinnen Williams and gave him the bag. If you're not going to extend Kenny Clark, then all of a sudden, and this is why this is something that I wanted to bring up, all of a sudden, like a player like Texas defensive tackle Byron Murphy, if he were to fall, becomes particularly interesting to me. Could they, in 2 of the last 3 drafts, go with a first-round defensive tackle? I think it's possible. Someone like Murphy certainly fits the bill. 21 years old, an incredibly disruptive interior pass rusher. Just something that I wanted to flag here. Because you can never have too many pass rushers. If Kenny Clark is going to be a long-term part of your future, I think you're in a really good spot there. Grab a run-stuffing nose tackle on day 3. Someone, to replace TJ Slayton if you're not going to give him an extension. And, he's been a nice player, but then you're fine. But if Kenny Clark is not a part of your future, and I don't know why he wouldn't be, I'm just saying, they haven't done this yet, then I think defensive tackle becomes, if not a frontline need, a important secondary need, maybe you can wait a year. Maybe you think Karl Brooks can grow into it. I think those are reasonable stances to take. But if they do take a defensive tackle at the top of this draft, I think we'll know the future of Kenny Clark quick, fast, and in a hurry. All right, we're going to go through the rest of this roster coming up in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. As you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's tonight. For the best Major League Baseball season preview coming up exclusively on Locked On Sports Today. Tonight, March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Now, here's where my thinking on this has changed. So you've got quarterback, you've got pass rush. Now, it used to be that the idea was corner came next or offensive tackle came next. But again, coverage is a weak link system, which means you are only as good as your worst player. That's true on the offensive line. That's true in the secondary. And we've seen this. Jair Alexander playing at an all-pro level and the passing defense is meh, or it's bad because the other players just aren't good enough. But when it comes to drafting, you also have to think about how much one player, if you get a hit, so think about this in terms of Madden. You get a player who's an 82. Okay, that's a solid to good player. A good player. 82 is good, right? At what position is that most singularly impactful? And the more the game has evolved into what it has become now, the more I think that position next after quarterback, pass rush, is receiver. Because one receiver can change your life. One receiver can change everything for an offense. Look at what it did for the Eagles, A.J. Brown. Look at what it did for the Vikings to go from Stephon Diggs to Justin Jefferson. Look what it did for Josh Allen to get Stephon Diggs. And so I'm going to put receiver next here. Now, the Packers have one of the deepest receiver rooms in the league. But there is this question. Do they have that alpha number one? Do they need that alpha number one? Now, I don't think they need it. But I don't think the Chiefs are the reason why. Because they have Patrick Mahomes. And they have Andy Reid. And they have a really, really good defense. Now, if you told me the Packers defense is going to be really good, cool. First of all, that sounds great. Sign me up for that. But I don't think anyone on their current roster is good enough right now today for them to say, we're going to pass up an opportunity to draft a player we think can be a bona fide number one receiver. Now, it's also true that a lot of the guys the Packers have drafted that have turned out to be really good players didn't, when they draft them, profile like alpha number ones. Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson. I think to some degree, Devontae Adams fits that bill. Randall Cobb in the second round. These were not guys where you go, we can build an offense around that guy. They became that. There is an ecosystem that allowed them to evolve into that. And I think you could have said that about Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks. Now, Christian Watson has the talent and potential to be an alpha number one. I think Dontavian Wicks has the talent. You could run a really good offense through Wicks. But the combination of everyone, the pieces fit really, really well. Could they use a ball winner type? Yes. But all of this is to say, while it's not a need, I don't think they have such high-end talent that they can eschew an opportunity to say this guy who is good enough to be the X receiver where you can just lock him on the backside and do whatever you need to do with him. We're good there. I don't see that as being true. As much as I like all these guys, Ross Uglum over at Packer Report has been using what he has been calling the Heath Melton line. Any player they add has to pass that. Like Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Wicks, those guys are your guys. Anyone you add has to be better than Malik Heath and Bo Melton. And those guys aren't like Bo Melton had a 100-yard game in a de facto playoff game for the Packers. Caught a touchdown and made a couple huge catches in the 49ers game. Like, that's pretty good to have a fifth receiver who's that good. Anyone you're drafting, you have to feel like is going to push to be in that top four in a meaningful kind of way, brings a different kind of skill set. So again, it's not a need, but it'd be nice. And I don't think if they have a chance to draft someone that they think can be a true number one, that they can say, nah, we're good. Now we're good. Now we get to this question of tackle versus corner. What is more important? I think for this team, the answer is tackle. Now, I don't want to rehash the whole conversation we had yesterday about the team needing an offensive lineman. Yes, Rasheed Walker, especially in the second half, played really well. But if you have a chance to draft a Tyler Guyton, who could be a legit Pro Bowl left tackle, that's the kind of pedigree and ability, physical tools. Amarius Mims, same thing from Georgia. Tyler Guyton's from Oklahoma. Rasheed Walker, to me, is not reason enough to pass on those guys. But I don't know that it's a need. Because you have two quality starters. You need depth. You could improve it. It's a little bit like receiver. You could improve it. And if you have the chance to take someone that you think can be a high-level, top 10 kind of offensive lineman, and that's, first-round grades, if you read, the grading scale that they use on NFL.com, a first-round grade is a likely rookie starter with the expectation of to be a good NFL starter eventually who ranks in the top 10 at his position. That is what a first-round tackle theoretically looks like. I don't think anyone's saying Rasheed Walker profiles like he could be a top 10 player. So from that standpoint, I think that's just worth pointing out here. Corner is where it gets trickier because you have Jair Alexander. You hope he's happy. You hope this defensive coordinator change smooths out whatever issues that there were last year, and they're good. I really like Eric Stokes. What he showed as a rookie was terrific. But I don't know that I can trust him to be on the field. And I like what I saw from Carrington Valentine. I like Corey Ballantyne as a backup kind of player, a cornerback 4, cornerback 5, special teams ace. Hell yeah, sign me up. I like Keyshawn Nixon as returner extraordinaire, locker room glue guy, sufficient nickel corner. I hope that there's more available in his game. I hope that they give him a chance to play safety. But this is the first one, quarterback, pass rusher, depending on Kenny Clark, where you go, there's no caveats, there's no nothing. Corner is a need. Because you just can't count on Eric Stokes. If he comes back and is healthy, he can be an awesome player. I really believe that he was awesome as a rookie, and the physical tools, the gifts that he has, the body, the speed, the explosion, none of which we saw last year. But he, especially in a defense where you're going to play a bunch of man coverage, you're going to press a bunch, he can be really good in this defense, but you can't count on him right now, today. And I'm not criticizing him. It's not his fault. It sucks what's happened to him with the injuries. It's brutal because he had such a promising start to his career. But I'm going to say the least interesting thing you can say on radio or a podcast or a TV show, and that is, it is what it is. I'm sorry that the injuries are what they are, but that's data we have to reckon with. And Carrington Valentine, when he gets to play press, especially when he gets to play man, especially, I really like what I see. But we're talking about a late day 3 player in year 2, who I don't think is ever going to have high ball production. He just doesn't have the ball skills for it, at least based on what we've seen and based on the college tape. So that's why you see corner being mocked to the Packers in round 1. It's why you see the Cooper DeJeans, the Nate Wiggins, the Kool-Aid McKinstries, the TJ Tampas, the list goes on and on. The Max Meltons on day 2. Some of my guys, Cam Hart, Kyrie Jackson. It's a need. And I think it's got to go right to the top. It's got to go right to the top. Now, the Kenny Clark piece, again, complicates this a little bit, but let's just assume, because he's on the roster, that he will continue to be on the roster. Based on the roster as it stands right now, corner is the number 1 need on the team. The Packers, look, it's not something that they've done a ton in terms of drafting. 2018, though, they did it. 2021, they did it. Brian Gutekunst has done it twice. He's only been the GM since 2018, and he's done it twice. He's had to remake this cornerback room. Now, though, we're through the premium positions. Quarterback, all set. Pass rush in pretty good shape. You never turn down more opportunities to get better there. The caveat is, if Kenny Clark is not a part of your long-term future, you need another interior pass rusher in a big way. And, 25, 41, 58. Not too early to get started doing that. Receiver in really good shape, but don't be afraid to add if you can. And offensive tackle in pretty good shape, but don't be afraid to add if you can. Not needs, though. Not really. That doesn't mean they're not going to draft one of these positions in the first round. Because again, you can always get better. These are the spots where you're looking at. But corner's the big one. Corner's the big one. Now, there are a couple other spots that we're going to talk about in a second, but those are the premium positions. Packers have one need that is a premium position on this roster. And they have some potential answers, some answers that I find interesting. Guys that have played good football in the NFL. That's a pretty good place for your roster to be. Now, there are some holes. We're going to talk about those in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Did you bet on the games last night? You had your chance. Don't miss out. Don't miss out because, there's these extra teams, these new rounds. Those are just opportunities for you to make money. Because you can bet on every game of the tournament. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Futures, some interesting ones right now. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So, you're saying, why did you lump pass rush all together and didn't put offensive line all together? Well, the answer is because, and this is changing, by the way, and you're seeing it. But the answer is it's easier to cover for a guard or a center who's not an elite player than it is to cover for a tackle who's not an elite player. And there's two reasons for that. The first is there's just more good edge rusher. I don't know why I said it like that. What word did I even just say? There's more good edge rushers. Every team has one, at least, really good guy off the edge. There's just more of them. And so that's the first part. The second part is generally it's 3 for 2. Like 4-man rush is the standard number of rush, right? Whether it's a 3-4 or a 4-3, with everyone in nickel now, if you're in nickel, 4 guys are coming, unless it's a blitz. So 4 is the standard amount of players to block. You got to tackle, he's probably going to be one-on-one. You got to tackle on the other side, he's probably going to be one-on-one. Now you can give chip help, you can slide the protection, you get tight end, but more often than not, those guys are going to be out on an island. The interior is where you have the center to help, or if you've got someone lined up on the center, a guard to help. It's just easier to mitigate problems, which is good for the Packers because that's where they have the problems. An unproven player is going to play right guard. I think of the interior spots, center is the more important because it involves checking protections and communication and all those things. You also have 2 guards. So if you have one good one and one not so good one, like you're kind of okay. You got one bad center, that's a problem. And the Packers have one bad center. So center is a need for them. I think you could make the case guard isn't. They have a plan in place. Sean Ryan is that guy. Year 3, this is your opportunity. You've got one more year of contract after that. You don't need to rush into this. But if you're going to take an interior offensive lineman, give him a chance to compete at guard or center. To me, center is the bigger problem because this is it for Josh Myers. So you don't have anybody beyond this year, and he is not a good player, just not an above average center. And so where do you allocate resources for that in a reasonable kind of way? Well, I don't have a great answer for that, but the Packers traditionally say day 3. Corey Linsley, before him, going back further, Scott Wells. They just, even if that guy's going to come in right away and they know they don't have a center, this guy's coming in and starting for us, day 3. So even though I've taken like Jackson Powers Johnson in some of these mock drafts, I know in my heart of hearts, it's probably not going to happen. If they take a guy early to play the interior, it's probably going to be a guard. It's probably going to be someone like Elton Jenkins who could play all 5. Hello, Graham Barton. Hello, Troy Fautanu. Those are the guys. But clearly, center, guard. Okay. After that, safety. Safety. I think you can make the case that safety in terms of positional value is more important than interior offensive line, but we're splitting hairs here. I think everyone is sort of in the rest of these positions are in a tier tied for last. It's like interior offensive line, safety, linebacker, running back. Tight end, I think when you have elite guys, they matter a lot. But we all know the tight end is, they're set. I kind of just seemed asked and answered in a lot of ways. They need another safety, but the signing of Xavier McKinney makes it easy to just go re-sign Rudy Ford, and you don't really have to worry about it. You could go sign Justin Simmons, like please, that would be great. But it doesn't matter as much because you have the one guy who whenever you want to play single high, he can play the post. That's where you are. And I think that is the more important of those positions. And so you could get a league average kind of player, say, can you do this? And they can, and you're not in a bad position. Linebacker's tougher, and the draft stinks. And the trade market is non-existent. So I don't know what they're going to do there. I really don't. Except maybe reach for Adrian Cooper, which I am kind of okay with because I see the potential. But that's tough. Because I don't think they have anything on the roster right now. I don't think Quay Walker is a long-term starter. I don't think Isaiah McDuffie is a long-term starter. So now we're stacking needs again. Corner is at the top in terms of need. Linebacker is next. They have to get something figured out at linebacker. I think ahead of safety because of the resources that you've allocated already to Xavier McKinney. And running back, you're talking about running back 3. They like Emmanuel Wilson. I don't know that you need to do much there. You don't have to. You could. If someone falls in your lap, if someone you really like falls in your lap, great. I think you could go the season and be totally fine at running back. Now, a year in the future, the Packers like to plan for these things. You don't have A.J. Dillon. So it'd be nice to have another player. But because you signed Josh Jacobs, a back who has power, 225 plus, I think you worry a little bit less potentially about losing someone like Dillon. I'm just feeling like, day 3 running back, just grab someone. Just grab someone next year. Grab someone the year after that if you need to. And you're fine. So to recap, I think there's really only 2 true blue positions of need. Corner, they need a plan. They don't have one. Not a reliable one. Linebacker, they don't have a plan. They need one, a reliable one. And after that, you're talking about, they could upgrade this spot. Again, we have the Kenny Clark caveat, but they could upgrade this spot. They could add another pass rusher, especially an interior pass rusher. They could, if they wanted to, if they saw someone that was awesome at tackle, they could grab them. They need depth at tackle, but they're pretty good at the starter spots. They could use a ball winner receiver, but they're pretty good there. They could use another safety, but they've got one really good one. And it's not that big a deal. So they just get a league average guy in there. They're fine. That's a really good position to be in as an organization. And to go in a draft where the corner group is pretty good. I like this corner group, at least through the first 2 rounds. It's a really good offensive line group, at least through the first 2 rounds. It's not the best draft to need a linebacker. But I think there are some players who could fit for what the Packers are looking for. I'm not going to be surprised if Adrian Cooper is the pick at 41. I'm just not. It's higher than I would take him, but not by that much. And I think he's the best linebacker in this class. I don't think you take linebackers in the first, but when you have a luxury pick at 41 and he's a really good athlete and a really good blitzer and an impact tackler, yeah, I can see it. A cornerback at 25 and an offensive tackle at 41 and then Adrian Cooper at 58. Optimal. But these things really work out optimally for any team. All right, back tomorrow. More on Locked On Packers. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Instagram, Locked On Packers. TikTok, for as long as we have that, Locked On Packers. YouTube, Locked On Packers. Anywhere you can find podcasts, Locked On Packers, so you can stay Locked On Packers.